By now it's common knowledge that there are two Helpi designs that appear when he's speaking to Cassie. The one with blue eyes and the one with yellow eyes. These don't appear randomly, however. It's dependent on whether it's the original Helpi program speaking or the parts that the Mimic tampered with. I decided to go through and collect all the Helpi text boxes I know of so I could do a bit more of an in-depth analysis. In total, I found that there were 13 instances of yellow Helpi and 28 of blue Helpi. We're going to go through those now. A lot of this I know might be old news, but I wanted to talk about it anyway, so you're gonna hear me talk about it. Also, this video will contain spoilers, but it will not contain any jump scares, so let's get into it. So we've got the two Helpis. Let's go over some general stuff we can expect from the both of them. Blue Helpi is our original Helpi. Ever since his introduction, he's been portrayed with blue eyes and seems to be a staple mascot among Fazbear-related informational programs. He's also got his portrait on one of the walls of the Pizzaplex. His purpose is almost purely informational. I say almost because Fazbear Entertainment, as we know, is a pretty shady company, and it isn't unheard of for employees or official statements to give off an uncomfortable impression. So while Blue Helpi is going to be generally trustworthy, given that he's the original, he's still a Fazbear program, so we can expect some company-related shenanigans at the very least. Yellow Helpi, on the other hand, can thank the Mimic for his existence. We find this out pretty early on while we're traversing the catwalks above Gator Golf.
What happened to it?
Yeah, with my help, I updated Helpi with a signal jammer. That rabbit thing won't bother you anymore.
We know by the end of the game that this isn't Gregory speaking, but instead the Mimic. The Mimic outright states that it's the one who upgraded Helpi. Another thing worth mentioning is that Helpi is speaking to Cassie directly through the mask, but the Mimic still chimes in to take credit through the Roxy Talkie. So we know that the Mimic has altered Helpi and that it's able to listen in on the conversations that Cassie is having with Helpi. Granted, this does happen while the mask is on, but since Helpi has also established himself as a brain resident, this link between the Mimic and Helpi might carry over without the mask. I'm inclined to believe this simply because we can still see Yellow Helpi in the real world. In the grand scheme of FNAF-related technology and happenings, this is at least plausible. So, Blue Helpi will aim to help us, whereas Yellow Helpi will aim to mislead us. So, Chapter 1. This chapter by far has the most Helpi communication, which makes sense given that he serves as a sort of tutorial function not only for Cassie, but for the player as well. We get a pretty normal and expected introduction to the Vanny network from Blue Helpi, that's all well and good, no red flags here. However, the next message is one from Yellow Helpi, and we are immediately met with a lie.
Ow! That hurts.
The rest of this chapter is mainly dominated by Blue Helpi. We get some company propaganda, the task that Blue Helpi expects to be helping us with, repairing rather than disabling, and some encouraging information about our surroundings. Our next conflicting Helpi encounter occurs while we are using the remote camera station. Blue Helpi is the one instructing us to press the intercom button, and the one to afterwards explain the intended purpose of the system. But the intercom played Cassie's voice, not any old recording by the company. Yellow Helpi chimes in here saying that it was his doing. He also noticeably loses a bit of that polite company standard way of speaking, but you know. Cool, so Yellow Helpi is able to take samples of our voice and apply them elsewhere, which for players who already know about the Mimic, this is a bit on the nose, isn't it? But I do think it is an excellent moment of foreshadowing and continues to foster that sort of mistrust of Helpi that I've seen so many players have during the game. The last message we get from Yellow Helpi during this chapter is delivered after trying the electrified door, and being told by Blue Helpi that the door is on emergency lockdown mode. Yellow Helpi refers to the security nodes as nasty and encourages us to deactivate them, which goes against the information Blue Helpi gave us right at the start of the chapter. Blue Helpi walks us through some more legal information and encourages our progress into the daycare. There are 3 bits of information that I want to address among these. Firstly is Helpi referring to Mexis as an anomalous entity, which could seem suspicious during a replay, as we know that Mexis was designed to keep the Mimic hidden away, but it's important to remember that Blue Helpi is the base program. He still thinks that Cassie is a technician and that the security nodes are undergoing repairs, as that's how he's programmed to operate. Also, Mexis was installed with the purpose of keeping the Mimic locked away, probably taking advantage of the pre-existing security nodes, seemingly built by an outsider. Whether this is Vanessa and Gregory or somebody else, it wasn't an official installation by Fazbear Entertainment, so as far as Blue Helpi is aware, Mexis is an anomalous entity. It's foreign to his programming, at least. Second, I appreciate the implication of this wording being that staff bots have a Helpi program running for them as well. And lastly, Blue Helpi explicitly states that he is detecting an unusual signal here. This could just be the anomaly locking down the screen, or the computer just not being active in the real world, but it is interesting when compared to the very next Helpi-related message we get. Which brings us into Chapter 2. We walk through the giant screen and arrive in Superstar Daycare. Cassie voices her disbelief and is in turn gaslit by Yellow Helpi. There isn't much else to say about this message as the deception is very clear. Blue Helpi pops in again after meeting the daycare attendant and gives us a rundown of the situation. Nothing else really worth mentioning here either. We see Yellow Helpi one more time in this chapter after we enter the mouth of the endoskeleton within the theater. I think the significance with this message is the phrase, "it's all in your head." Blue Helpi has referred to the mask as a different perspective, or as AR mode, and is generally very encouraging, whereas this is a similar tone to the "you must be seeing things" explanation from Yellow earlier. Maybe I'll just start calling them Yellow and Blue now. That's easy enough to follow along, right? Anyway, this message also works to further emphasize the different speech patterns between the two of them. Chapter 3. I only got 2 Yellow correspondences in this chapter, and none from Blue. They are Yellow avoiding Cassie's question of how she managed to get somewhere seemingly unreachable, and the message after we see Mexis get pixeled out of the tube. This first one, again, falls in line with the previous 2. The second one I have already sort of spoken about earlier in the video, but I do have a teeny bit to add here. Given that the Mimic is the one who installed the signal jammer, it makes sense that Yellow would be the one relaying this information, as it wouldn't be in Blue's code to do so. I think it's also interesting to point out that the pixels that got Mexis were gold, yes, but it matches the Yellow Helpi. It's a nice touch. Chapter 4. We have a little bit more going on here thanks to the server room, and the messages in this chapter come mainly from Blue. Yellow is quick to chime in after the device is enabled, referring to it as a signal jammer similar to his own. However, we then get a message from Blue explaining that the device is an AR inhibitor. The disconnect between the two Helpis becomes a little clearer here, as it seems like Yellow was not quite familiar with the inhibitor. The server room is probably one of my favorite areas in Ruin. Not only is it visually appealing, but I also find it fascinating from a lore standpoint. Blue takes most of the charge while we're here, explaining where we are, implying that the server room acts as a sort of safe space from outside forces, though we know Mexis isn't a malicious entity per se, and explains that if we continue on, we should be able to reach the raceway. I think the change of wording from repair to deactivate from Blue here is easily explained by how deactivating the nodes are what restored the power, and the introductory greeting to the Vanny network would be the same for all new users. At least, this is what would make the most logical sense to me. I do think these parent nodes existed before the Mexis was designed and were just repurposed, but that's not what we're talking about here. Yellow pops in when we try to take the mask off, stating that he is the reason we are unable to remove it while we're in the server room, which, you know, suspicious. The lore implications of this are really interesting. What does the server room look like in the real world? What is it that Yellow doesn't want us to see? Does this room actually have a real world counterpart, or is it something similar to walking through solid objects or the tube slide down into Phaser Blast? The skeptic side of me, however, is always quick to remind that this is an important part of the game and very easily and plausibly can be explained away by it being easier for the developers to just disable your ability to take the mask off altogether. Does it have lore implications, or is it just game design? The fact that it is Yellow saying he doesn't want you to take the mask off is, I think, at least somewhat significant, but I'm not inclined to read into it anymore, at least not right now. The last message we get from Yellow is about wording semantics and generally just being an annoying little shit. Chapter 5. I didn't actually find any Helpi interactions in this chapter. You'll get this stuff with the intercom anytime you open a camera station for the first time after booting the game, but that dialogue doesn't change. If I missed something here, let me know. Chapter 6 is another short one, just 2 messages from Yellow. At first, these don't seem suspicious. It seems like the type of information relayed in the way you'd expect from Blue, but I think there's a reason that Yellow was the one saying this to us instead. In the server room, Blue mentions the goal of saving Gregory, so he does know about that now. I think Cassie would have been able to make it to the other side of the raceway without deactivating the other parent nodes, and that's why Yellow chimed in. To make sure we continued so that the Mimic could get free, and so Cassie wouldn't catch on to something else being up. With our goals changing, Blue's do as well, and it's his job to help us succeed at our job, and there's no reason for the original Helpi program to challenge this change of plans. Sure, you could argue with his mention in the server room of deactivating all the security nodes in the West, but AI isn't all-knowing, and we've seen him progressively learn about the environment as we play. He's used intuitive guesswork before. Chapter 7 is short as well, but this time both messages are from Blue. The first is informing us that we found a way into Phaser Blast, and the second is providing us with another potential option should we not want to use the vent. There's not much else to say here. Chapter 8 is another silent chapter, to my knowledge, but given how short this chapter is anyway, it's to be expected. Chapter 9 gives us one message each, from Yellow and Blue. The first comes from Yellow, congratulating us for completing the Mimic's mission. He mentions locating the source of the radio signal, which, yeah, we could have guessed that's where it was coming from, as that's what Gregory has been telling us this whole time, but it also serves as a reassurance for Cassie that she's on the right path. Then Blue comes in with a warning. We're leaving the Vanny network coverage zone. And that's it. I'm sure you know the rest. So it's pretty clear that Yellow stems from the Mimic, but this does lead us to some other questions. How was the Mimic able to update Helpi? We know it was trapped underground with the ever-vigilant Mexis rabbit guarding the cell, and we also know that it had managed to grab the walkie-talkie presumably left behind by Gregory. It also looks like it had managed to disable the security node set up in the room where the Mexis resides. With that, I personally believe that this is out of my depth, currently. Yeah, I really haven't thought too much about it and don't really care much further than for continuity purposes. Some details that I do think are worth mentioning are the similarities between Maskbot and the mini music men that are out in the open, as our friend in the vent seems to have remained unscathed for the most part. The Blob is still around and probably still connected to all the Pizzaplex, and the marionette-esque wires are still everywhere. But I'm less inclined to believe that the Blob, or the wires, I guess, are helping the Mimic. But hey, I don't know. If anyone has any ideas surrounding this, I'm all ears. But until then, I hope you managed to get some sort of enjoyment out of this video, and as always, there is more to come. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.